There's another busy weekend of United Rugby Championship action. Mixed results again for the South African teams. The Lions going down 24-6 to the dominant Leinster. The Stormers also suffered a loss. They went down 28-17 to the Glasgow Warriors. There were wins though for the Bulls and the Sharks. Let's take a look at how that log looks after this weekend's fixtures. Leinster dominating on top with 6 wins from their 6 matches. The Warriors are now in second, with the Bulls and the Lions rounding out that top 4. The South African sides do have a game in hand on the top 2 teams. The Sharks are languishing in 9th, with the Stormers struggling in 13th position with just 2 wins from their opening 5 fixtures. Now, what would a Tuesday be here on Sport1 without some analysis on the rugby weekend's results, as well as the latest from the Springbok squad preparing for their end-of-year European tour? We welcome back again Skalk Boertes, otherwise known as the Rugby Nerd. He's also the host of the rugby podcast here on Sport1. It's called The Scrum Down. Skalk, thank you again for joining us. Again, mixed results, but mostly good. I mean, three out of 4 wins for the South African sides. It just seems as though Leinster are difficult to beat.
They are. Listen, that's definitely the team to beat at this stage. The Lions did put up a good performance. I think especially the Lions' defence was fantastic, considering that they were bracing on an onslaught from that Leinster attack. Also keeping in mind that this is the first time that Leinster did not get a bonus point for 4 try wins. So scoreline a little bit flattering. There was only a late penalty try. So Lions' valiant effort on the day, just not strong enough for Leinster.
Okay, let's also look at the Sharks. A very good performance from them. They'll be happy going into the break.
I think it finally looks like the Sharks is clicking. You know, they have all the names. They've sit with a squad of 16 Springboks in the mix. They've just not been gelling. And Plumtree trying all different tactics, like the coach now, not really getting his team. But on this day, it just still feels like everything was clicking. So you had a dominant scrum, dominant impact at the front there, and just running rugby. You see that that Shark backline really do look very, very potent at this stage, finding gaps, and then someone like Fussy just finishing off the tries. So, no, great performance by the Sharks, and you definitely see them now picking up.
What's interesting about the Bulls is they're just seeming to being able to find ways to win in difficult situations. No cards, thank goodness, this week, so we're not talking about that. But, Jake White just grinding, just listening to him in the post-match interviews, just, finding ways to win when they shouldn't be winning. And
isn't that the earmark of a championship team? It's, I think Jake also referred to as not winning, winning ugly. And that's exactly the case here. We're going down to Italy. Again, that poor, or not poor, but really wet conditions, really not favouring the South African teams. The Bulls not leading up to the 80th minutes of the game. So really, but shows that they don't go down. They always keep themselves in the game, and they just find a way to win. That last try, it was a pushover try from Forster. Really looked like the whole Bulls team was in that rolling movement, and then pressure kick for Dan Creel. He had to put that over right as the buzzer was going, and with ease slotted over. So
now they're top 3, looking good going into the break. We'll get into that break now. Let's just talk a little bit about the Stormers, because they really are battling at the moment.
And they look scrappy, considering the caliber of players they have. They're really just not clicking. The amount of forward passes, handling errors, it really was disappointing. The occasion was fantastic. They played at Donning Craven Stadium, so a decent crowd, full capacity Donning Craven Stadium. Crowd was there. It was the vibe was there, but really just not playing to their potential. They do look like they're lacking a bit of game cohesion at this stage. Not sure how they want to play, and hopefully this coming break will help them just to realign and looking at the way forward at this stage.
Let's talk about the break now, because there's a month off for the international games. How do teams play that? As some, I guess, see it as a good thing. Some of the teams who have momentum see it as a bad thing. As a coach, as a players, how do you deal with this month off?
Yeah, now it's managing, because in a way it's a bit of a pre-season training again. So if you have a squad like the Lions, for example, not losing any of their players to the Springbok squad, you've got a full squad now, not getting game time. So they need to keep focused, they need to keep sharp. Then you have someone like the Sharks and the Stormers who's losing 11 to 16 players. Now it's a case of bringing in I think it's quite tricky. The Stormers, the coaches would really need to manage the teams now well to see from a fitness level, are we going to make it, but also just to make sure that, listen, looking at what happened that first 6 rounds and how to fix it. I think there's a lot of going back to the drawing board, just see, okay, well, what worked well, what didn't. Unfortunately, you might see some momentum last year. We did see them previous seasons as well, where the top 4 teams are playing fantastically, coming back. They do lose a lot of momentum, kind of resetting. And listen, this tournament is quite a marathon. You know, we're playing on till.
Well, let's talk about that, because I find it frustrating.
Yeah.
I like to
Because
watch a tournament from start to finish, like they do in cricket, or you know, in other tournaments. You know, you're now stretching this URC over months and months and months. People kind of lose focus, they lose interest. You know, but I guess there's no other way to work around it.
Well, that's not the curse of being in the European leagues. You know, we used to, in South African terms, used to Super Rugby. You start your year, you finish, you go into your first internationals. Quite a different scenario, and unfortunately, that's not the only break. We're going to see the teams back in action now for about 3 weeks when they're back. Then they take another break, because then the teams head off to the Champions Cup as well as the Challenge Cup, based on the placements on the previous season. So a bit of a disruption there. Then they come back, and that's the second half basically we need to play out. So a bit of a stop and go. So really, it's
surely at some stage people are going to have to look at the organisers or the runners are going to have to look at. You know, it's a new competition.
Well, new for us, Peter, but remember, this is how the Europeans, that's how they play their rugby. And I think from a spectator value, unfortunately, it's a bit of an open book scenario. And like you say, you might see a little loss of interest, or when you're back after a month now, everyone needs to see where are we, how are we doing. So there's a lot of factors in play, but I think most importantly for the players, just to keep their focus, because there's so much else happening. At the end of the day, you still have the task at hand.
You spoke about the Sharks. Plenty of them are going off on the Springbok tour. I mean, that's quite a big disadvantage in many ways, because now, you know, they step up a level. They go to on an international tour, whereas the Lions can perhaps rest some players, can strategize towards what they have there to take it forward for the rest of the season.
Well, I suppose pros and cons, right? Because on the one side, yes, exactly like you said, but on the flip side, remember, because this whole championship is so long, you need to start bringing in your depth, and you need to see, okay, who's there, who can play cover if I'm getting a critical injury at 1 or 2 spots. So I think pros and cons, Peter, but now it's really getting down to team management, and you'll need to see the coaches really now stepping up their game to see, okay, well, forward planning and how to condition these guys.
Okay, let's touch on the Springboks. Willemse out, you know, just looking at his replacement, Rassie, working some magic there as well. Tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on that.
Magic is one word. Maybe controversial might be the right word to use. Very similar to the previous Rugby World Cup, where we saw Marks, the hooker, getting injured, then get replaced by Pollard, the fly-off, and then kind of winning it for us at the end with Pollard's introduction. Very similar here. So Damian Willemse unfortunately got injured in that game against Glasgow. Quite weirdly enough, he went over for a try, and it looked like it's a groin injury. Very uncomfortable, so clearly he's not touring. But that opened the door for Cameron Hanekom. Now, Hanekom, quite interesting, it's the 8th month of the Bulls, being really the blinders of the season this year as well as last year. Picking up, he's saying, coming through the ranks, you know, you played SA Schools under 21, so coming through the ranks, but everybody's been really saying this is the new number 8 for the Boks. Was quite unlucky not to be chosen early in the season. He was in the camps initially, but didn't make the cut at the end. But some reckon he is the complete number 8, and looking forward with some team players or Springbok players really getting to the end of their careers. These are one of the very exciting finds. I think also that Rassie was a little bit under pressure, because there was talks that Wales was looking at Hanekom as well. Now, he's got a Welsh grandmother, which kind of put him in that space that he would qualify then to play for Wales. Wales, as we know, is in dismal state at the moment, so any quality player they can get in, they'll grab. So maybe that just forced Rassie's hand a little bit. And listen, knowing Rassie, I won't even be surprised to see Hanekom making a debut against Wales in the last Test match.
Just to cement the fact that he's a South African.
Yeah, and just to kind of, prove a point, I suppose. But listen, this is very exciting, and I think Hanekom can learn a lot from the likes of Jasper Wiese now on tour. And like I said, this is a really quality player coming through. So not a bad choice, but now you see another forward and one less back. I think in Rassie's mind, he sits with a very on-form Fassi at fullback, his first choice, I would imagine. You've got Willie Leroux on 97 caps, hopefully making his 100 before the end of the year, but also someone who's phasing out his career. So I think Rusty's quite comfortable. They've got cover. It's only a three test match to us, so I think that's enough cover. Then bring in the youngsters, and that's something that Rusty was criticised before, not to include more youngsters into this touring squad at this stage.
I guess for many Bok fans, we'd rather have the young bloods on these end-of-year tours and get them prepared for the next World Cup, because that's kind of always the end goal every World Cup that
but
comes
I think
along.
also looking at Rusty's, I think what he's also thinking is this season so far. Remember, we only had 2 losses so far, one against Ireland, one against Argentina, only by 1 point each. At this stage, it's sitting at an 85% win ratio. The last time we had this was 1998, if I'm not mistaken, when we had that world record breaking 22 unbeaten games at that stage. So I think Rusty also wants to prove a point to say, listen, let's go finish this tour on a bang. You know, this could be a watershed tour for us, and kind of setting us up now for the next World Cup to say, listen, on a win percentage ratio, this is kind of the platform we're building on. So let's see.
Look at some of the guys, Faf de Klerk has been left out, not because of injury. Speculation is that, he's trying to get a core group together, slightly younger. He's looking ahead to see, okay, who's going to be there for the next World Cup, realistically, and then take them out of the scenario and try and bring guys in that could potentially be there.
Yeah, I think that's now a bit of a juggle for Rusty because it's the aging squad, right? So Faf is a very good example. On the one side, he sits with all the experience, but on the flip side, Faf de Klerk was very effective when we were playing the kicking game. From box kicks, from the base, and he was very effective. And looking at the new playing style, was more expansive, more running rugby. Someone like a Grant Williams from the Sharks, who's been playing fantastic rugby, and he fits that mold. Kobus Reinach also a little to the end of his career, but it's much quicker distribution, and I think that's kind of what they have in mind, is to get the distribution much quicker out. And that might be a key reason here. And unfortunately for Faf, his age is not in his favour at this stage, and we want to get that pairing or 9-10 pairing ready for the next World Cup.
Yeah, but you look at the forwards as well. Peter Steph Tutua, Eben Etzebeth. These guys are kind of reaching the end. Sia Kolisi. It's difficult to see them going through another World Cup.
I think we will. I've got a suspicion we are going to see most of them. I think we'll see some player management. So someone specifically like Hanukom coming in, giving some rest time for Peter Steph, for example, Kwagga Smith, the fetcher. All those type of players I think we'll see a bit of rotation. But I've got a suspicion, your key positions, your let's call them the hard-hitting men, your Etzebeth, your Peter Steph Tutua, the Viking coming back now. He's in fantastic form, so I think he's going to make quite a nice impact. But you want to have that core just to make sure you have that, because you'll see that usually with forwards, their lifespan is a little bit longer, even though they're taking so much hits. But I think it's just that you need that hard man at the front there with some experience. And I think Rusty, that's kind of his game plan clearly. Just looking at the rotation and maybe a bit of a void in certain places. With Lock, we're all a little bit stretched as it is. So nice player management for the next few years.
In the greater scheme of things, how important are these 3 test matches looking ahead to the World Cup?
I think the game against Scotland, England, yes. Wales, unfortunately, is just dismal at the moment. So I don't see a lot happening. It's not really going to have any value. We played them at the beginning of the year. There was a big score. I think it was 41-16, if I'm not mistaken. So Wales will not be the competition. I think the game against England, playing England at Twickenham, I think for us, that will be a nice measuring stick. Remember, last year in the Rugby World Cup, we only managed to beat them by 1 point after they were really actually favourites throughout that game, putting up a big score. And just by chance, it's today exactly 1 year ago since we won the World Cup. So
really,
yep. So that's now
the rugby nerd. Watch out.
So that's now a year later, and the next chapter. That's exactly the focus now, to see how for the next 3 years what is needed for us to be on prime form.
Schalk, thank you. I know we'll be chatting again later on in the week. Schalk Boertes is our resident rugby nerd. Trust me, he knows things that other people don't know. You can catch his podcast here on SPORT1. It's called The Scrum Down, every week on a Saturday, and you can check the app to see when the repeats are airing. So do tune into that Scrum Down podcast.